Welcome to the Good Intentions Show, coming to you live on the UI Radio Network. The Good Intentions Show is sponsored by the United Intentions Foundation at unitedintentions.org, a virtual community where you learn to create, track, and manifest your passions one intention at a time. Look for us on Blog Talk, Spreaker, iTunes, Stitcher, Player FM, and many more. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram under United Intentions and on Twitter at Higher Intention. Yes, this is the Good Intentions Show, where you will meet people who live life intentionally and hear about things they're not telling you in the mainstream media. And now, here's the truth seeker, the snake charmer, a legend in his own mind, broadcasting live all over the universe, your host, Mr. Tim Ray.
Notice, get me rocking and rolling early in the morning here, somewhere in Roswell, Georgia, hanging out with my besties, Suchi and Otis, and also my co-host, Mark Stephen Pooler. Hello, Mark. How are you?
Hi, Tim. I'm really well, thank you. Great to be here. Looking forward to an incredible show today.
Absolutely. Calling all the way from the UK, folks. And isn't that great modern technology? We could be best friends sitting here, sitting next to each other, or at least appearing next to each other, and we're thousands and thousands of miles away. This is modern science, I guess, at that point. Also, Mark, of course, is an international best-selling author and radio host, and he's doing so much great work out there in the UK. Real quick, Mark, before we start welcoming all our friends from WWDJY 99.1, as well as WTTA 101.2 in Kentucky and Ohio, why is this so important to you, what you're doing right now with your, not only writing your books, but with you being a radio host? Why is that so? Why is that so passionate for you?
To share good messages, get real good messages out to the world, and showing people transformation, inspiration, and really helping people to live to a higher purpose.
I just love your altruistic perspective, and I know in our shows past we talked about your coming through everything you've came through, and it's just so wonderful to have souls out there, Mark, that are doing what you're doing, sharing and changing lives. As they look and mentor you, as they see what you have done, they believe they can too. So thank you very much. And we have a fantastic guest today, don't we? We've had her on our Wake in Atlanta show before, Melody Garcia, and she is also an international best-selling author and also international keynote speaker. NLPNA certified coach. She's coming in here shortly, and she's going to be sharing her wisdom of what she's doing with a faith walk. She's a woman always ingrained in faith and understanding that, and what she's done. And we're going to be talking about the new psychology, guys, for many ways. And what that means is the old intellect, where we were, at least psychology, psychoanalysis, and everything like that, was the study of the intellect. Although psychology was born out of the study of the soul. We kind of lost that over the decades, and now we're bringing it back, because the new spiritual psychology is something that really, that's why all these life coaches are popping up everywhere, aren't they, Mark? Aren't life coaches everywhere? So it's amazing how this is a whole new opportunity to grow, learn, and go within, and then be connected to everyone else through that spiritual interconnectedness. So, guys, hang on. We'll be sharing that and talking about this all day today, or at least for the next hour. And so welcome all our UI Media app listeners out there, as well as our Talk 10 FM, and, of course, everyone on the Facebook, internet, iHeartRadio, RSS feeds to wherever it goes, Spreaker. Who knows, right? What's going on? So, Mark, anything you want to say today for who helped sponsoring us today?
Today, our show is sponsored by sexual abuse trauma expert Sarah Griffiths. If you're struggling to create loving relationships and finding it hard to trust, visit www.sallyg.com for a free 30-minute session. Really looking forward to today's show. I was so lucky to meet Melody at an event a couple of weeks ago, introduce myself to her. She's got an incredible story to share. And if you would like to ask Melody a question today, please call in on 678-495-4345.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, guys, and thank you for sharing this information. And so, without further ado, Mark, why don't we bring in Melody?
Welcome to the show, Melody.
Yes. All right. And Melody, if you haven't yet, you may want to turn your volume down on your cell phone so it's so you can hear the feedback on that. So, welcome, Melody, and we are just so excited about having you on the show. And there's so much more about you that I think we talked a little bit about last time. But before we jump into the psychology of the soul, I mean that's
Yes.
really what the program really is, the psychology of the soul. And probably should change that title to that. is is Melody? Tell us a little bit about your walk. How did you came to this realization where you are today?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me back on the show, Mark and Tim. Good afternoon to UK audience and everywhere else in the world. Good morning. How did I come about? Well, literally started with as I was a child, right? I grew up in a very interesting household. My father was Catholic. My mother was Seventh Day Adventist. When my father was away, my mother would sneak us into the Seventh Day Adventist church. And then when my dad was home, we'd go to the Catholic. And growing up, I actually preferred the Catholic services, not because of the values or lessons. It was because the time was 1 hour. And I had that thing down packed memorized as a child when I was going to get out of church. But as I grew older and really got into the heart of the teachings, biblical teachings, I started seeing a difference in my personal walk. And this is, again, my personal experience. So now, and then my parents had always been very open about let's go visit other churches, right? Let's not limit ourselves to a specific religion, but let's take a look at what everybody else is talking about and or teaching. So anyway, fast forward, I was a little kid, and unfortunately, something very tragic happened to my family.
Mm.
My parents have always been huge in philanthropy and humanitarianism. My father was a very well known doctor in the Philippines, and my mother was very known in her own space as well as, a corporate manager and an entrepreneur. So it was the perfect balance of harmony between the two of them. In their walk, they've always believed in giving back to society because they both came from very impoverished backgrounds. So here it was, I kind of compare it to, have you both seen the movie Crazy Rich Asians by
Yes.
any
Yes.
chance?
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. So we were surrounded by those type of people. My parents were always grounded, but at the same time, I was the girl that grew up with several maids in the household. But we also made sure that we did our chores when the maids were off. So there was a good balance. My parents always said, and you look at this, it's almost like a what do you call this? They have this terminology where you say it enough and it becomes a reality, right?
Okay.
But my
Sure.
parents, yeah, my parents always said, always know the basics. At least do the dishes, do your chores, do all of this, right? You're not going to be excused from knowing how to do these things just because we have maids growing up, because one day you never know when you lose all of this,
Hmm. Amen to that.
and
Yes.
you need to know how to survive and be grateful for everything that you have, right? So that's exactly what happened. One day my parents decided to take in this distant relative of ours who was struggling in making ends meet, took it in our home, and in his odds and ends job discovers like a political corruption, and decided he didn't want to keep it to himself and wanted to meet with media. So, from my recollection, he sat, well, not he sat, but he set an appointment with radio station similar to this, right, that we're doing, because he wanted to share with the public these things that he discovered. Unfortunately, that meeting was interrupted. He was kidnapped right in front of my mother's place of business
Uh,
with five people who pretended to be cops, shoving him in the back of a car. And that was the last my parents ever saw of him alive. He was, just for listeners' sake, I'm just going to keep it light. But when I say being shot would have been very merciful,
he's
for the
tortured.
2 days, he
Sure.
was basically tortured, violently murdered
Oh
for the
God.
information he contained.
Right.
Well, he was staying with us, right? He was living with us. So naturally, they thought that my parents knew something, which were completely clueless. And we had no idea our family was under surveillance. We had no idea that our home was under surveillance. Next thing you know, the same people use that psychological scare tactics
Mm-hmm.
of literally going to my mom's place of business, making their appearance known, whether it was in her, businesses that she owned. They would sit there, camp there, and they had pictures of me and my sister, just complete surveillance of craziness, that things you ever like see in bad action movies, was now a reality. And the threats were coming in saying that if you don't keep your mouth shut, the things we can do to your daughters, the things that we can do to your family. Now,
That is actually pretty like a movie that you're describing a
it is.
typical
It is.
action horror movie out there. And so with that threat going on, I'm gonna let you continue here in a second. But with
Yes.
that threat going on, uh, your whole life, everything has changed. I mean, you had
Oh, my
this life
goodness,
of
yes.
luxury to now this thing where your guys are captive. You're prisoners in your own home.
We are. So, because I remember being yanked out of school, we're locked in on security. We lived in a private compound, didn't matter. They still had some way to get to us. And I remember just, just awful stress that we couldn't figure out what was happening between me and my sister. The maids kept hush. We were not allowed to get out of the house. And the last recollection I have of the country was being woken up in the middle of the night with maids frantically packing everything in the dark, and there was a white van waiting for us outside,
Oh God.
and we disappeared, and that was it. That was it, right? And about a week later, even though we've come to the United States as tourists in the past, now it's a different lifestyle. Now this is a permanent move where we literally had to leave everything behind. My father had to be left behind to tie loose ends. It took him about maybe 2 years, a year and a half to follow us. And now we were living at a relative's home. Gone were the comforts of home. My sister and I were now sleeping, basically on a makeshift bed thing on the floor, right?
Mm,
And my mom had the bed, and the three of us were sharing one bedroom. And still, my mother's heart, be grateful that we have this.
right.
In the meantime, you've got two young girls going, what just happened? When are we going back home? Right. And my mother goes from a life of having, the title and everything she's ever worked hard for in her life, completely gone, to humbling herself to take an application at 7-Eleven,
Wow.
right? And sweeping gas stations, making like $3.25 an hour to make ends meet for her two daughters.
Yeah, when you
You
gain
know?
something, and Mark, you could probably chime in that too. When you have
Mhm.
something and then you lose it, and then you have to live this whole new lifestyle that you never been
Mhm.
accustomed to, and then to try. And I think even with that being said, I think it's still it's more of an advantageous opportunity because now you have contrast. You know what you had, and you
Mhm.
know what you don't have. Where a lot of people who
Mhm.
are bought are raised and come from, say, poverty. I mean, real
Mhm.
third world poverty. They have nothing really to contrast with. They have really don't know
Mhm.
other than that they watch some fancy dancy TV show to that degree.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
and I know you could see the distinction between that, but
Right.
but when you do have something, you lose something. I think the pain is much more sharper because you had the contrast. Now, when you don't know any
Right.
different, you don't know any better. It is what it is, right? So
Right.
so
There
you
were
go ahead.
well, there were several layers of pain going on. It was a separation from my father,
Right.
unexpectedly, moving to a different country that we visited as tourists. But what do you mean now we're going to have to live here, right?
Yes.
A change in dynamics of culture, environment, and then, even though grateful, being at the mercy of someone else's rules because it's
Right.
not our home.
Right.
Right? And so that very controlled environment, and at the same time dealing with those emotional traumas, because within a week after landing in the United States, my mom's like, now it's time to go to school, right? You're going back to school. So, I mean, just think of those major transitions. And now we fast forward. I grew up in the United States. I'm a great student. I become successful in the corporate call center environment, managing teams, right? Sales teams. And then 2013 happens, where everything comes into full fruition of that faith seed being planted.
Now hold that thought
I
because
am.
Mark wants to take us out of here, and then we come back.
Mhm.
Mark, tell us what we're going to experience.
Yes, I was just going to say hold it there because we're just getting to some really juicy parts,
Mhm.
and let's pick it up after the break, Melody. I can only imagine that trauma as a child that you was going through to move countries with all the other stuff that happened. That's a lot for a child to go through. Let's pick up straight after the commercial break.
Yeah. Thank you.
find it hard to trust and feel you have no control? Do you struggle to create loving relationships and feel guilty and ashamed? And do you feel not good enough, disconnected, and rejected? Sarah can change all of that with and for you. Sarah Griffiths is a sexual abuse trauma expert and specializes in helping people heal from the trauma of sexual abuse. She will help you feel whole again and remove all of those negative feelings, even when you think you have tried everything. Her methodology is cutting edge, unique, fast, and it works. Find out about her free 30-minute session at www.sallyg.com. That's SALLYG.com and experience it for yourself. Every emotional issue has a solution. Let Sarah help you find yours.
Not only in studio in the United States, or as they say, the States, but also in UK. Melody, where are you calling from?
I'm actually here in the United States.
All right, you mean in the
States. Back in
States.
Florida temporarily.
All right. Well, we're here, guys, with Mark Stephen Pooler, international bestseller author and radio host, co-hosting with me today on the Good Intentions Show. And, of course, Melody Garcia, who's not only a P&A certified coach, which we'll talk about, but also an international keynote speaker and international best-selling author. So, wow, we left off on your story. Just give a little recap for some of our listeners that you basically were living the life in another country, and you had you had everything you possibly needed growing up, very thoughtful, humble parents who understood hard work, at the same time appreciated and were grateful for what they had. And then all of a sudden, overnight, disaster happens. You have family being kidnapped. You're threatened. You guys had to leave literally in the middle of the night out of the country to survive and to live your life. And here you are. You're in the States, living mattress to mattress, and you're figuring out what just happened. I mean, talk about PTSD or trauma. And like we mentioned earlier, is the contrast, your experience, overnight contrast in reference to life. And that alone is traumatic. And you said at this point, back in 2011, you mentioned? 13, things shifted and changed. And why don't you pick up from there?
All right. So 2013, the Philippines now gets with what they call a typhoon, which is a hurricane, but it actually was the strongest hurricane that ever made landfall during that time. And they measured the width, something like, for those in the United States, the width of coming from like Florida to Canada, the size of the storm was massive. So, wow. There were over 10 million people impacted. Now, of course, with any natural disaster of that proportion and calamity, every single media outlet was covering the story. And in my case, it didn't matter how long I've been gone from the Philippines. There was still a calling, home was still home, right? And for many years, even though I had the opportunity to go back, there was something just emotionally telling me, no, don't go home yet. Don't go home yet. But this storm happens. And of course, I'm going, oh my goodness, the country, what's happening? So I turn on the news and I see this massive devastation, like just horrific devastation everywhere. Because it looked like literally a nuclear bomb went off in several different places, right? It even picked up a merchant ship and threw it on land. That's how powerful the storm was. But then this is where that, I call it God's voice, God's whisper, just started, I just started feeling just strong intuition and started hearing, stop watching that, go on the internet news.
Wow.
And at first I questioned, it's like my sanity, like, what is this? Right. And literally it was just, again, it's just stop watching that and go look at the internet news. Because back in the days before Philippines censored any news, they showed everything, right? And so I went on the internet news and looked up Philippine hurricane Typhoon Haiyan. And by non-accidental chances, we're going to go more into this, I come across a story of a woman, and watching that, Tim and Mark, completely broke my soul because it was a story of a woman. And as I said, they didn't censor anything, who was holding her 2 dead children, who was probably less than 5 years old. Their lifeless bodies in her arms and devastation around her. And just this look, this just ghostly look with one question, why?
Mm.
You know, well,
Yeah.
why
Yeah.
did she
Why?
survive?
Yeah.
For 3 days, she couldn't even bury her children,
Sure.
and she just held them.
Mm.
You know, and as a mom, because I have my two sons, that hit my. It wasn't just my heart; it was my soul that broke, because she had no idea where her husband's been taken, her home's gone, and yet how in the world would God spare her when she's lost her
Yeah.
children?
Yeah. Your understanding of God at that point becomes very confusing, and
Of course.
you go from this black and white perception of God, which most of us, especially in the Western culture, have
Mm-hmm.
this black and white perception. You know, good and evil, right?
Mm-hmm.
Truth and lies, and you start
Right.
questioning. Okay, how can that happen? Is there gray here, right? And you probably
Mm-hmm.
were going through that transition, I would assume.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And you question your very sanity of faith, you know? And so seeing that something triggered in me very deeply, and maybe it was a past trauma of loss in a different way. But all I remember was that I started sobbing, like just crying for this woman. I felt her pain very deeply, even though I didn't know her and she was halfway around the world. And the next thing I know, I'm on my knees crying and unleash what I call becomes this amazing, incredible faith walk prayer that now grants me for everything that I am today. Because the prayer went, help me help them.
Yeah. Help me
And
help
now
them.
you're right, help me help them. And now activate all the gifts you have given me to help me reach them.
You know, this is the prodigal son experience in many ways, if you look at it. Mark, I
Mhm.
mean, most of us, I mean, I have to say, most of us who are in conscious media or and have
Mhm.
known people who are in their circles, I mean, from almost everyone, we've had this revelation or realization that, wow, there's something more spiritual going on than we've been told, believed, you know, propagandized, whatever it may be. And when we have these real life experiences like Melody just described, that now her whole life has changed. She has a calling. I mean, this is Melody. This is not just a
Mhm.
a business opportunity for you. I mean,
Mhm.
you shifted, and this not many people do this, but more now than ever before, in my opinion. But you
Mm.
shifted your complete life around to meet this calling. And Mark, do
Mhm.
you want to add to that?
Yes. So basically, what had happened is because even that prayer was different. You know, whenever a lot of us get into prayer, it's usually we ask for things for ourselves, right? Bless us, provide this, we need money. I mean, everything, heal us and everything. This was probably the very first pure prayer of just complete tears for someone else completely different, people I don't even know, of saying, help me so I can reach them, right? Activate everything you've given me so I can use it to reach them. I didn't know how it was going to happen, but I knew that I had to do something, right? So here's the beauty of the story of the unfolding of now everything that we're going to be discussing later. I woke up the next day with an epiphany of going, well, hello, Melody, you sing, right? You sing, maybe. And then this number 20, Tim, was on my head,
Hmm,
right? And actually heart, if you want to put just this impression of number 20 kept coming back to me. And so I said, huh, you sing. You can put a small little cabaret concert together and invite 20 people that to attend this. That's 20 more people that can donate more than you can at this point.
right.
And I'm like, all right, so let's do with that. So of course, me and my little idea at the time decided to go to Facebook and I'm like, I'm going to put together a cabaret concert. I'm calling all singers who wants to sing with me, right? And I actually sent this. You're going to laugh. I posted this to the Filipino American Society. The next day, my messenger was going nuts with all these performers that wants to sing with me, but I noticed that none of them were Filipinos. And I actually said, "Where did I post this?" I, I double checked it, and sure enough, it was in the same group. But I was just like, okay, maybe just who knows, whatever. And I basically said to them, "No one's getting paid. This is a humanitarian little benefit cabaret concert." And they're like, "Not a problem." And then my creative strategic thinking, because of corporate world as well, right, and business now, I went, now I need a nonprofit to line up with me because just in case the 20 people who's going to donate needs a receipt. And within that same day, I called a nonprofit and they're like, not a problem. We're going to partner up with you. We'll write the receipt.
Hmm,
And I even told them, you're not keeping any administrative fee. And they're like, absolutely, 100% goes to the ground.
Wow.
Right. We started saying the ground. We don't even have a plan where this thing is going.
This is a field of dreams moment, isn't it?
Yes. If you build it, they will come, right?
What strikes me, Melody, is a tragedy the other side of the world, even though it was your home. It really shows how connected the whole of the world is. And then you've really taken action to help those people, the other side of the world, from your hometown. And that really brings us nicely to how you impact lives and human potential. So carry on for a short while.
So then the reason why I said this is I have to explain this series of what I call miracles that happened, right? Is then and now I said, okay, well, that was fairly easy. Within 24 hours, I had singers and a nonprofit. That's like, wow, that's a no-brainer. So then about 2 days after I said that prayer, I said, now I need a venue. Now you have to understand this happened in November 2013, going into December now, right? With all the news media going crazy over that story. And I was up against a very tight, what do you call this, limited space for venues who wanted to charge me thousands of dollars. And in fact, I said, if I had thousands of dollars, so why would I even plan to do this? I'll just send the money over, right? So here's the first clue that this was bigger than me. 3 different friends who doesn't know each other gave me one pastor's name to contact and said, check this pastor. We told him about you, that you're needing a venue. And I went, that's kind of too coincidental. So I called this guy and he even tells me, well, I have a small church. It holds 200 people. Of course, me and my comeback said, I only needed it for 20 people because there's just 20.
Yeah.
And he said, let me get back to you tomorrow. And I'm like, not a problem. This is now 3rd day from the amen. This pastor calls me and goes, I have great news. You have a venue. You don't have to pay a dime. You're going to sponsor it. You named it as a sponsor. And of course, my natural question is, does it hold 20 people? And he said, Melody, you've been donated the concert hall auditorium for Forest Lake Academy. It holds 650 seats.
Wow. Yeah.
This is day 3 from that prayer. And literally I had to put, to just pause and say, what the heck is happening right now?
Right.
How do I have singers, right? How do I have singers? How do I have a venue? And how do I have a nonprofit all lined up in less than 72 hours? And then I remembered the prayer. And I'm like, and at 0 expense, which is unheard of in 3 days. Right. And then I said, what the heck am I calling this thing? Why do I have a seat for 650 people? That was when One Night, One Voice was born. It just came to me very naturally.
One Night, One Voice.
One Night, One Voice. I called the event One Night, One Voice because we literally had one night to make voices heard.
Wow.
Well, as I now take to social media, because that was my little advertising engine was Facebook, right? It was a one-man show, one-woman show.
Right.
I started getting messages from people I don't know halfway around the world, from family members saying, help us. We're dying.
Right.
Help us. We're starving.
Right.
You seem to be popular.
Right.
So over the next 3 weeks, sometimes you have to be careful what you pray for, Tim.
Yeah.
Because when I said activate all the gifts you've given me, I didn't sleep. It was on full activation of miracles upon miracles upon miracles that before I could even ask for anything was being provided to me.
Wow. This is a great example of, and Mark, you could take us out, but this is the greatest example of when you really let go and you go in the flow. And I think the flow currency is so strong because it's so much wants to occur that often our ego and our psyche can't even catch up to it. And so we don't know how to regulate it. It's like this new energy force. It comes in within us. We don't know how to regulate it. And what happens is it's too intense and we burn ourselves out. It's a process. And so when we get back, we'll talk about that psychology of the soul, right, Mark? And we'll talk about taking that to that next level after what this incredible experience she done touched people all around the world. I mean, that's amazing, isn't it?
Takes a lot of courage what you did. After the break, we'll talk about the ego P&A certification.
Yes.
And let's join after the break and carry on where we left off.
Yes.
All right, guys. See you in a second.
UI Media Network's show on WTTA 101.2 FM, and we bring authentic content to you. So stay tuned.
Hey Atlanta, a lot of people these days imagine their retirement kind of like an endless drive in a gas guzzler, worried they're going to run out of gas. Only in retirement, it's running out of money. At CFK, we encourage our clients to think of retirement as an epic journey. And on this journey, you're going to need to know where you are now, where you're headed, and how to get there. We create the roadmap for your entire trip and guide you along the way. You can get started by meeting with Frank Kelly in person if you're in the Metro Atlanta area. Visit cfkfinancial.com or just reach out to have a chat with Frank at 678-784-4090. CFK Financial is retirement well planned. Frank Kelly is an investment advisor representative of Retirement Wealth Advisors Incorporated, an SEC-registered investment advisor. CFK Financial, Retirement Wealth Advisors, and the United Intentions Network are not affiliated.
All right, we are back live on the Good Intentions Show. I'm co-hosting with Mark Stephen Puller, international best-selling author, and also we have Melody Garcia as a special guest today, and also an international best-selling author. So that's an incredible story, and where you are today, it really is. So let's advance the conversation. Let's talk now about what actually happened behind the spiritual scenes here. Okay.
All right. To make a long story short on that concert, because like I said, there's so much miracles, which you can read on my book anyway, that took place. That number 20, remember, Tim, I was like, that number 20 was impressed on me.
Yeah.
And I thought it was supposed to be 20 people attending the show. You know, it turned out to be very successful. The auditorium was nearly packed to capacity without advertising. But that's because the end result of One Night, One Voice ended up helping over 20,000 lives.
Wow, that's
halfway
incredible.
around the world.
Incredible.
All mark with a calling that, you know, she looking at a small calling of 20 people, or not small, but to her it was a lot, calling of 20 people, and then just exponentially turned into something much bigger. It was a calling that was much bigger than you probably even realized, that your mind was not even able to wrap around it. You know, Katarina calls it the superflow. You were in the superflow.
Yes.
And
I was in complete superflow. And the only reason why I shared with you the story of how we had to disappear in the beginning, as part of this miracle unfolding, was connecting with the CNN Hero of the Year recipient who wrote out to me, who lived in the Philippines, when I wanted to borrow his quote, wrote out to me on Messenger and gave me such a task that overwhelmed me. And it was a simple sentence of saying, "Oh, hero of your country, rise up. Your people need you."
Boy, we could use a few of those quotes here in the States, I'll tell you that much.
And I cried. Yeah. I cried so bad. But, you know, but then it also became a homecoming, even though I haven't been back to the Philippines since then.
Right.
It became a homecoming to now in servitude. Right.
Sure.
So now we move fast forward. Just when I thought 20,000 was pretty sweet, it was a once in a lifetime deal. I was done. I did my good deed done. Right.
Yeah.
It was literally only the beginning, because it became a catalyst to me forming UNICEF in Orlando that now represents 190 countries in global advocacy.
Right.
When we talk about spiritual humor, God has jokes because he knows of the fact that I stay away from politics as much as I can. So what does he do? He drops me right in the middle of Washington, D.C. year over year in Capitol Hill to now meet with members of Senate and Congress to advocate in this children. You know, it's like I'm in the muck of it, trying to now basically, and those very adversities. Here's the one thing that I could talk to you about: spiritual psychology or spiritual maturity.
Okay.
You learn in this faith walk that the very adversities that you've faced in your life becomes the authority of your platform for your purpose.
I love that. Repeat that again, because when you say it becomes authority of your purpose.
So the very adversities you've experienced in your life, once you have that awakening, right, becomes the very platform of your authority.
Right.
And your purpose.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right. So in my case, would I have not experienced separation, disappearance, you know, hardship growing up, would not have probably given me and positioned me the compassion that I have along with the team, and with current issues of separation of families and the migrants on the move. We're not going to get into the political talk of all this rules and regulations they should have followed. But when I look at a child, and this is what UNICEF really stands for, is children knows no politics. Right? I remember having, I came from a very good family, a wealthy family, and all of a sudden we're thrown in a whole different dimension of suffering out of our control. So
Right.
when I look at these children that are crying, right, and everything that's happening currently around the world, you have to remove the political opinions and focus on a children knows no politics. And that's where my team and I comes very strong at in meeting in Capitol Hill, when the advocacy happens, because we somehow have to turn the statistics that government sees in trying to remove this budget allocation year over year for international aid, right? And humanize them and say we have a moral obligation. And I don't come across that strong, or could not have, if it wasn't for my personal experiences. And talk about alignments, again, spiritual alignments. Even my entire team is dynamically composed of people who had resonated in their different walks of their own experiences, that has now formed this very powerful Orlando UNICEF Unite volunteer team that literally headquarters have looked at us, right, in New York going, what is Melody doing so freaking differently in Orlando? Because it has led us to even a private meeting with the Princess of Morocco. These are like unusual protocols.
Listen, I think once you open up the gates
Yes.
of politics and you get involved in that, it's an automatic division. And now, at the same time, to get things done in this materialistic three-dimensional world, you almost
Yep.
have to enter the muck of politics to get things done. So there's going to be mud thrown on everybody when you go down into that. And I think a lot of the people, and this is probably a good little segue we could talk about too, is there's a lot of people who stay in the spiritual ethers and stays away from politics purposefully because of the muck and the ugliness of the density of the three-dimensional world and what gets tainted and what gets added onto you. And I understand that to a certain degree, but I also understand, we're here in this three-dimensional world for some reason. I may not know what it is, but we're here to do something here. Otherwise, we would be our light selves, flying around, Mars or the universe, wherever else may be where we go. I don't know, but
Well,
let me get a question out to you. So here it is that we're now, most of us do get engaged, either local politics on some level with the council or school board or whatever it may be, or more larger national politics, which you seem to have been thrown into, which of course you said you don't like to do. And as you make way in the muck and you're trying to make way for the intention and the purpose of really assisting children, I mean, transforming lives, saving lives, do you find that your perception, your perspective of your spiritual connection sometimes gets lost because now you're involved in the muck of the politics?
Actually, no, because even, and I'm going to bridge this even into speaking space, right? Whether it's stages or whether I'm an international media presence in television and everything else that I'm involved in, there's always a prayer that goes before me. Let it be your wisdom, never my ego. So it neutralizes that corner when I ground myself. For example, Proverbs 3:5-6 is one of my favorites. Whenever there's like this toss up and confusion happening in my life, to trust and to always look back at one night, one voice, and remember the miracles that had taken place. Right? Because here's the thing: how I avoid that spiritual, or not spiritual, but political muck. Right? Is I have this one goal, which is to protect and to help children around the world, families around the world, not experience this pain and suffering they're going through. But yet, I also look back at the Bible. Sometimes we get disillusioned or we get desensitized with everything that's happening, that the Bible is treated as a history book versus a living word. So I had to get into my reasoning of if God's word was true and it's living, and it's the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow, then everything that had taken place miraculously still lives today as it was yesterday, as it will be tomorrow. The question is, who are the light bearers, if you want to look at it? Who are the social conscious leaders that now in our calling, in our walk, in our message, that we can reach out to and say, rise up, right? Because I can't do this on my own. And I know they're everywhere around the world, because once you get into that alignment, it's funny what happens. You attract who you are. Sometimes you attract what you need to heal, but at most times you really truly attract who you are. And this is what it comes to the heart-centered space.
Well,
So
Melody, we teach the lessons that we need to learn the most. So the lessons you're out there teaching are the lessons assume that you need to learn the most. And that's when we become experts in our field, because these are the lessons that we're teaching, because we're focused on it. What we focus on expands. So we're learning more information about these lessons, whatever it may be. So what's your lesson? What's your lesson right now that you're learning the most?
Well, it's really, to me, it's building solid relationships. I don't think it's a lesson. It's really a value if I look at it, right? Because it doesn't matter, like in the political divide, Democratic, Republican, I'm neutral. I go in there and I'm like, I'm representing.
Yeah, they're all crooks to me. So, you
right?
know.
And yeah, I mean, it's hard, but you know what? In building relationships with their admin staff, I mean, I'm on my 3rd year of advocacy. I go there and we're in first name basis. They're like, Melody, welcome back. I'm like, good, let's not make this hard on my team this year or any UNICEF teams. But because there's the value of truly building organic relationships,
right?
You know, people still need each other. I don't care who you are. Yeah, there's a time where you're going to get lonely. I don't care how much money you have. When that loneliness hit and you realize there's nobody around you, there's always a saying that people, you know, money can't buy everything. Money cannot buy relationships. Money cannot buy true, authentic friendships.
Does it concern you? Does it concern you that some, like in politics, especially with senators, representatives, and even more so the lobbyists that you have to deal with, everyone's so self-serving. I mean, everyone has their own angle, their own perspective, and trust me, I've seen it and been in that.
Yeah.
And when people with this good, and you have your focus, right? Although I believe your self-serving focus is nearly, on the bigger scheme, humongous, because you're serving the world, or you're serving children specifically. But do you find that a little discouraging when you have to maneuver left, go right, when they go up, you got to go down just to be able to keep the focus on your mission, where they're figuring out how they could benefit from this too, from the exposure, whatever. Does that ever get you to the point of being a little discouraged?
No, actually not. You know why? Because of the fact that, again, I've gotten to a point. You look at even my corporate history of over 20 years, right? 2 decades, has completely almost prepared me for this. Being in sales negotiations, overcoming objections. I've trained all this. So going into this, I've had this skill set, right? That it was always heart-centered, right? Of neutralizing any debates that may even come my way. I'm mentally and psychologically prepared for it because of the skill set foundations that I've had for 2 decades of actually teaching this particular values or skills to former employees and getting really good at it. But to me, if I can hit their heart, because that's where everything is contained right there, right? And when you hit someone's heart, not mind, but their heart, because mind will reason out every single argument. Heart feels the separation. Heart feels the pain. Heart feels the hope. And when I train my team on the advocacy space, when we talk about it, it comes from a heart space. And when you come from a heart space, there's no arguments.
Mark, do you understand? I know you understand, but do you sense that, back to the psychology of the heart, right? Or psychology of the soul, is when what Melody's saying is that when she gets involved into this political world, she stays focused on the heart, and then she resonates with the ones who stay focused on the heart. It's not everything, though. To live, it's tough. Trust me, it's tough out there in the politics. But if you could stay centered on that, my God, what difference can you make?
I think she's just made so many great points and pearls of wisdom, and she's really showing that you have to come and lead with authenticity, which will impact lives. Not going with your ego is really important, what she mentioned. And I do think it's important to come from the heart, because when it comes from the heart, you feel good. When you don't come from the heart, it doesn't feel so good. That brings us nicely to our next commercial break. Melody, we've still got so much to cover of your amazing story, and you are just a true example of leading with authenticity. Let's pick up straight after the commercial break.
can create it. Imagine growing up with this understanding. Visit imagineifprogram.org to know more about our social, emotional, educational program.
Looking for comfort, relaxation, and special face and body treatments? Then be our guest at Equinosio the Spa, North Atlanta's premier natural day spa located in Roswell, Georgia. A relaxing way to treat yourself and your loved ones. We offer custom facials and skincare, personalized massages like our CBD massage for chronic pain relief, nail care with zero-gravity chairs, natural lash lift, and more. All set in a relaxing and refreshing spa environment. Everyone needs a place to relax, unwind, rewind, and escape. Find it at Equinosio the Spa, where wellness is beauty. Schedule your appointment today by calling 470-639-1599. Again, 470-639-1599. Or visit our website at equinosiothespa.com. That's EQUINOZIO, thespa.com to find out more.
All right. This course show is sponsored by Sally G at sallyg.com. Give them a call or check them online and get a free 30-minute session. So we're back talking to Melody Garcia. She's a PNA certified coach, international keynote speaker, along with my co-host Mark Stephen Pooler, who's also an international bestseller author. So Melody, before we get back to that story we left off on, what is a PNA certified coach?
Oh, it's the best of the best. That's all. No, I'm just kidding. It's basically, it's psychoneuroactualization, right? So this was created by Dr. Steve Maraboli, who's the top behavioral scientist in the world. And his list of clients is too long to list. But basically, it's a breakthrough influence methodology. So I'm going to give you the scientific explanation, which has gained worldwide attention for the effectiveness. It's basically, when you bring it down to, it's an important behavioral breakthrough in maximizing the human potential. Right. So this is now the heart-centered, where I went through intensive training with this man. Talk about academic migraine. I stayed away from medical field for a reason, only for the calling and purpose to bring it right back to a certain degree. We were studying the human brain. I was studying medical terminology I never thought would I ever hear in my entire life. But it was literally about dopamines and serotonins and how the human psyche, right, on a heart space. And it's literally where my best friend is a psychotherapist, which is hilarious in itself, right? I love her to pieces.
Right.
But in the field of psychotherapy, it's you look at conditionings, past traumas. They give it a name. They give it a diagnosis, right?
Well, you hit on the nose.
They deal with trauma.
You hit it on the nose. You look at it from pieces. You don't look at it from a holistic perspective.
Psychoneuroactualization jumps in the reality of that person. And it becomes the science of influence over persuasion. Persuasion will have you agree the diagnosis. And I actually had a personal experience in this when I was going through some, deep pains in my life in 2015. I remember going into a psychotherapist office. And the first thing she nailed with everything that was going wrong in my life is I had daddy issues. And I'm like, excuse me? How is this related to that? And of course, my brain started arguing with this person.
Right.
And I literally walked out of that session.
Right.
Because it didn't make sense in my world. Right. It didn't make sense in my world where, let's say I'm having a horrible day. Everything's going wrong. And you just brought me to my 4-year-old self that had no connection to anything that I was going through at the moment. So when and I thought it was just me, but when Dr. Steve Maraboli and all his teachings, like I said, he's world renowned and literally disrupted, the science of all of this.
Yes.
He goes, Melody, if they tell you the sky's blue, the sky's blue. They tell you the sky's pink, because that is their reality. You cannot argue with people's reality, which is why a lot of these therapy sessions fail.
Yes.
They argue the therapeutic side of it instead of jumping in the reality, and by use of influence, bringing them to that next level of their human potential, really maximizing all their experiences for them, right? Because our job is not to argue and diagnose in our field of coaching. Our job is to heal, get into their heart space using the dopamine, serotonin, how they respond. Well, one of the questions that we ask, and it's true even in my particular walk, I've attended a lot of the big events that I really loved, right? The big guru events, let's just say it that. But I also remember that after weeks had gone by, I don't sustain it. And majority of people don't sustain it because they start crashing. Why? Because it was it was just a dopamine fix.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where PNA comes in, of neutralizing all of those and saying, how do we sustain longevity? How do we sustain success? How do we sustain your goals? So it's not this quick hits, just like getting hooked on cigarettes, right? Or just this adrenaline or dopamine. Like I said, but it's a very complicated subject to get into. However, with the new science of psychoneuroactualization that's been hailed in every single parts of the world now, comes into the heart-centered leadership. This is one of the reasons Dr. Maraboli was very specific. And through high vetting practices, it's not open to everybody. This is not one of those, if you pay me, I'll certify you, right? It's the, let me vet your character, let me see your history of leadership and your confidentiality because of the clients that are going to come your way, right? Because of who he handles around the world. But it was more like, let me see who you really are, your character, your authenticity, your integrity. What adversities have you personally gone through that can relate back to helping others, to helping serve others?
I'd like to ask Melody, how does it work? How do you use it, and what are the benefits?
Well, so I've started using it, and again, to me, it's truly a combination of signs of listening, right? And when we say listening, people are just like, yeah, I listen. No, listening in itself is a process. I took this course back in college where there's 5 dimensions. It's called searing. It's you sense, you interpret, you evaluate, you respond. Those components of listening alone. And so if Mark was to come up to me and said, you know what, this really sucks, I'm not going to say, hey, look at that, have an ice cream. No, it's really great, because we're not connecting. And that's what a lot of these coaches do. They give you this mindset rally of like, no, it's great. No, it's great. In the meantime, you have people spiraling down into depression.
Well, cookie cutter, right? They give you a cookie cutter
cookie cutter. Here's your mindset behavior. Let's rally you back, and it'll work for maybe an hour.
Yeah.
And then that person falls right back down. I'm the person and coach that goes, all right, Mark, I understand how painful this can feel because I was there too. And just gently bringing them back and say, but now, in my coaching style, we're not going to talk about goal setting. Everybody does goal setting. You want to be a millionaire at age of 5, it's goal mapping. How am I going to take you from point A to point B to your finish line? What does your life look like when you're 90 years old, looking back? Who are the people you want to sit down with that you can literally call? Let's say, Tim, when you're 90, who's the person you want to have lunch with, that you've built your life to that certain level, that if you wanted to have lunch with former presidents, it's because you've established a confidence in that mapping in your psyche. And then in my case, and Steve knows this very well, right, and in my particular calling, is that spiritual faith walk that keeps going back. I would not be so, it would be ego for me leading if I said that everything I've accomplished was because of everything that I have done, based on ego.
Well, you believe the Spirit speaks through you, moves through you, connects.
Well, there's so many miracles in my life that cannot be refuted. That was marked by One Night, One Voice. In fact, I can openly share here without going into details. Last year alone, like the last year and a half, there were some moments in my life where I said, what is happening? Because prophets started lining up, right? And in fact, by the time the 4th prophet came up to me and said, there's this word, right, or visionary, I even got a call as far as Qatar from a seer, which again, to me, I'm like, I was mystified by all of this, because I always used to think, you look again, going into the Bible, you look at those things as a history moment. They cannot possibly exist today. But then you look at everything that's happening in the world in supernatural order, if we want to look at it that way. And I said, yes, those people do exist today.
Yeah,
because good and bad still exist today. So when they start speaking things that have now come into fruition, right? Because at first I was like, no way. Once one of them said, you're going to be speaking on stages you've never covered before, Melody goes, with high political people and celebrities. And I'm thinking, oh, you mean I go to UNICEF and I speak to politicians? He goes, no, not to them, with them.
Yeah.
And shortly thereafter, United States of Women, by again, just by natural alignment, I became part of a panel called Purpose and Opposition. And the main keynote speaker was former, First Lady Michelle Obama. Is literally a few feet away from this woman going, oh my gosh. And I'm looking at a program with our faces next to each other. I'm going, oh my goodness. Right. Because now the prophets, everything that has been foretold, if you want to put it that way, is coming into full fruition. And it's still unfolding.
Yes.
As we speak.
Well, and that I think, Melody, is a testimony of what you've been able to do and how you are living in the flow and how. But it's not just having the intention. I mean, you got to take inspired action. I think that's where behind the scenes. I'm sure if we had more time, we only have a few minutes left here, but I'm sure if we had more time, you would share what it's like behind the scenes. It's tough work. You got to be at the right place at the right time. You got to make the right call. You got to be able to make sacrifices. You got to be able to have discipline to be able to get where you want, to get the focus on what your passions are. Of course, helping kids and also helping individuals with your special coaching and with psychology. But I would have to say, wouldn't you agree? And Mark, you could chime in on this too, that your heart-centered approach, this new psychology that you're talking about, really keeps where you don't burn yourself out. Right? I believe truly, Melody, that energy, we're play in energy. Energy is within us, without us, all the same energy. It's just we have to learn how to accept it and understand it and manage it. Because like earlier when you were having your experiences at when you're starting the big group, it was so intense for you, it burned you out. You didn't know how to handle it, right? And it was just a matter of, wow, this is high currency here. And so as we learn and connect with that source energy coming through, ego goes to the side. And it coming from the heart is where it really drives it.
Right. And to me, going into the big groups was great. I mean, the energy was great, but the message was lost in all of that for me particularly. I took notes. I was an avid student, but it wasn't until I was able to really pinpoint what are my strengths? Where do I find most value? When I get overwhelmed, what are my go-tos? And it's always been the ocean and music for me. Right?
I love that.
It's always been. Yeah. But the one thing that I will share with you that has resonated, which I did share with Mark, is the 3 values that I can share with your audience today.
Please.
That had led me to where I'm at, other than the faith walk, right? Of course, to me, it's like God first and everything else will fall into place. But in this case, it's number 1, nobody really cares about your story until you win. So win. Because I can walk into any, I do media interviews as well. Everybody has a broken story, but it's in the service for humanity. What have you done for others? And all that brokenness, because that becomes a catalyst to your purpose. Well, you've got to win at that. Because people will only pay attention to you when they're seeking solutions you've already discovered yourself. So nobody cares about your story until you win. So win. The second one is that our relationships, right, whether it's business or personal, are shaped and nourished by the commitment we express through our actions and not just our words. So even though we can give our words, extra generous, we can be so eloquent, that it's not until you're generous with your deeds or actions that comes into life.
We got, and what's the third one, real quick here?
And the last one is never ever let other people's opinion define who you really are.
Ooh, I love that. So, I love that one. So Mark, we gotta close out here. And how can people reach Melody? And Melody, you are such an unbelievable soul. Thank you so much for being on this earth and doing what you're doing. And hang on for a second after we close out.
Quickly tell the audience, Melody, how they can get a hold of you.
Sure. On Facebook is Melody Garcia. On Instagram, it's Melody Garcia VIP. And then you can always email me at melodygarciavip@gmail.com.
I've really enjoyed having you on the Good Intentions Show. I am going to remember you for bringing out human potential, authenticity, impacting lives, coming from the heart and not leading with the ego and leading by example. Thank you for being a great guest. Tune in on Monday, 11 a.m. Eastern, the Good Intentions Show. Tim Ray is joined by special co-host Susan McDowell.
Yes. Excellent. Thank you, guys.
You have been listening to the Good Intentions Show on the UI Radio Network. The Good Intentions Show is sponsored by the United Intentions Foundation at unitedintentions.org. Look for us on Blog Talk, Spreaker, iTunes, Stitcher, Player FM, and many more. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram under United Intentions, and on Twitter at Higher Intention. Be sure to log on to unitedintentions.org, a virtual community where you learn to create, track, and manifest your passions, one intention at a time. Have a wonderful day, and until next time, live life with intent. The United Intentions Foundation and its associates take no responsibility for the opinions and statements made by the talk show hosts or their guests.